I'm from Southern Illinois, Bloody Williamson County, where this is true. This is not a preacher's story. Where they used to have a hanging right after church every Sunday. It was a really tough area. My mother was a nurse in the Heron, Illinois. Those that are cognizant of Southern Illinois will know where that is. And I was born, and they thought I was twins because I weighed 8 pounds and 10 ounces when I was born. My precious mother, she almost died. She had me. So anyway, I was born there, and my father worked for Peabody Coal Company in Southern Illinois. And when we shifted several years later to Danville area, it was because at that time that was the largest underground mine in the world. 14 clicks 10 miles out.
Oh, wow.
The click, if that's jargon term, cuts in the coal 10 miles out on each one of them. And there was coal still all over that territory. But they were closed up when the EPA came into power.
Oh, yes, government regulation.
Government regulations cost more money to clean the coal than getting the coal out. But there's probably, no one but God knows, but 50 more years of coal in the Peabody mine there.
Right.
And my father, now that's regressing some, but my father worked for the coal mine after he returned from the Second World War. First World War, I'm sorry. My mind's going.
Yeah.
And he returned, and the mine explosion, they had one company doctor,
Right.
and they had over 100 men died in that explosion. And my father's 2 remaining sisters, Aunt Jessie and Aunt Katie, just young girls, their mother had died.
Right.
And they heard the whistle. When the whistle blew, that's like the whistle at the temple, you know, when the high priest blew the whistle, there was something happening. Well, the town whistle knew exactly what had happened. And they went down, and my father was in the stack. They just had to stack them up. Dozens or hundreds of men were just stacked up as dead. And his sisters saw him breathing. And they said, well, our brother is not dead, and get him out of there. But one doctor and one nurse couldn't possibly take care of all those people. So, I mean, nobody's going to bring a suit to that.
Yeah.
But my father wouldn't have been alive, and I wouldn't be here had it not been for two darling sisters that came down to see, because they didn't want people to come down and see. That's not an overly pleasant observational period.
No.
And anyway, out of that came Jim Strauss, out of that lineage. And my father, at that time, now this is a different world. We're in a different world in Kansas no more.
Right.
My father just graduated from what we know as grade school.
Okay.
But I say this because I knew him. He was one of the most brilliant men that I've ever been around.
Right.
But he hadn't gone to college.
Right.
But there was almost nothing. He became a bookkeeper. Well, he could keep books better than the bookkeepers. But he just did that on his own. Very intelligent man. My mother was a nurse, and she's always, that was a long time ago when there was only aspirin and what's the bitter, I'm sorry, my mind's going, what's the bitter medicine that people, quinine. Oh, I'm in the quinine department here.
Okay.
And that was the only thing that was for medicine. And so I still, to this day, that's 70 some years, well, more than that, 75 years later, I can project quinine's taste just thinking about it.
So it left its mark on you.
Let's put it that way. Yeah. Its influence is indelibly planted. I don't take quinine, have it for some time. But those aspirin and quinine were the only medicines, and that's the medieval period in the Dark Ages. But
now, the home that you were raised in, did your mom and dad, did they take you to church? Was that a part of your regular?
Well, eventually, technically, my mom and dad were raised Southern Baptist.
Okay.
So that is technically not fault. They were not evil people, but they were not preoccupied with that.
Right.
And but their heritage, their grandparents and parents were Southern Baptist. And when a long time after that, when I became a Christian, my father was an excellent gambler. You could imagine a bright person gambling. He was not an alcoholic, but he drank. I never saw my father drunk at all, but
he could enjoy a cold beer.
Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
And but I never at any time saw him. If he was, I never saw him.
Right.
But anyway, when they came to Las Vegas, I remember that just like it was yesterday.
Oh.
They came to our town to see my dad. A little bitty. The town's so small; it's only there on Thursdays.
Right. Yeah.
And they came from Las Vegas. They heard about his gambling power. And these men, these Las Vegas gamblers, said, "Ernie, we want to hire you. We understand you're the finest gambler in this area and you don't cheat. And that's who we're looking for." He said, "We have gamblers that cheat in Las Vegas," which they still do.
Sure.
But they said, "We hear that you're amazing."
Wow.
Once in a while he would not win, but not very often.
Okay.
And most of the people didn't want to play with him in our little town. You know, that all they had to do was go from the coal mine to go 2 hours in the tavern there before they went home to eat. And but anyway, I remember that. That's not something to brag about. I'm not putting that in the dossier, but he refused to go.
Oh, okay.
He wouldn't do that. And when I became a Christian, he stopped drinking, no 10-stop business.
Right.
In 10 days, he was not smoking or drinking or gambling in 10 days.
Oh my, so they had a significant effect on him.
But he was never anti-religious. He was not,
right.
If you're asking me, certainly. But
not walking around angry with God.
No. But anyway, my mother was quasi-instant. In fact, her heritage, besides the Baptist church, had been influenced in the 20s with Jehovah's Witnesses. They came to town with all the answers.
Right.
And they studied. Nobody else studied with them. Well, anyway, she for 10 or 15 years was bamboozled with the Jehovah's Witnesses. Then I became a Christian, started studying the Bible. She said, "Well, I don't believe that anymore." So I had revival meetings in my own home.
Yeah.
And my brother, I had a brother that was a radio operator on the Albert T. Harris. That was a destroyer escort to protect the Indianapolis, and it delivered the nuclear bomb that was dropped on Nagasaki and one on Hiroshima. But the Japanese submarines sunk the Indianapolis, the ship that he was on. Sunk the Indianapolis, but he was on the Albert T. Harris.
Which is escorting the...
It was supposed to escort him, and they were responsible. Well, he had just gone off the radio, my brother, he said, minutes before. And the captain of the boat and the radio operator were court-martialed because they were not perceptive about the Japanese submarine. They were court-martialed. He remembers that to this day. He said, "Now I would have been court-martialed had I been on the radio."
But he had just signed off. And
he just signed off. But anyway, all those they're not trivial.
Right.
But anyway, that if anybody knows, even today they have destroyer escorts to protect the bigger ship, so they're highly mobile.
Right.
So they could get away from the Japanese submarine. Well, for some reason they were not observant. I don't know.
Sure.
But when he came, my brother never forgot that. When he came, and he was not an alcoholic. He became one, but he was not when he came.
Right.
And he never could forget just minutes later, I would have been there. Well, anyway, that's just some of the history.
Now, as far as you becoming a Christian, what was the circumstances?
Roy
surrounding
L.
that?
Moore, and I suppose Roy's dead. He was a preacher in Florida. At that time, that's over almost 50 years ago, he preached at that time in Illinois, the great Florida church, about 500 members. One a day, you got Sunday school classes that large, see, but
Right.
that was large. He was a traveling evangelist. That's when you could have evangelism 2 or 3 weeks. If you couldn't have a 3-week meeting, you were immoral.
Okay.
So anyway, we had one. I went to the meetings. I listened. I became obedient. Ed Smith, man had just died last year, baptized me.
Oh.
And but it was during a revival meeting. They preached the Bible, which made sense to me.
Sure.
I always asked, well, how much sense does that make? See, I'm not overly emotional.
Right.
And
you didn't necessarily have like a religious experience.
No, not anti-religious
Right.
experience.
But that's not what compelled you.
No, that is not what compelled me. And it was in the Bible. Then Ed Smith had graduated from Cincinnati Bible, and so had Roy, those two men. Well, I went to Cincinnati for 3 years. Then I finished my work at Butler.
Okay.
They, at that time, now not now, but at that time, they would take 2 of our Bible colleges work.
Transfer the credits.
All the credits, and I just had a few to finish to get a degree from Butler, which is, and
so Butler was a school that had remained with the disciples of Christ after the 1934-36
34
split.
after
Okay.
the official.
Right.
Nothing ever happened just on those dates.
Right.
That. But that was representative. And well, anyway, at that time, they accepted all the record. I just had a little bit of work. I got an MA from Butler, and I got a THM and an MDiv from Butler. And then I went to Indiana in, it was at that time, University of Indiana was the first state university that had a PhD in the history and philosophy of science, which has been for 60 years my concern. See,
Yes.
so, and I'd heard about Planck and Heisenberg, all these people, 50, 60 years ago. See,
Right.
now they're just coming to fruition. But I heard they had more money than, see, prior to that development, all of those teachers had been in the philosophy department.